The veil of betrayal is about to be lifted. And the perfect facade of a family is on the verge of shattering. From the pinnacle of success to the abyss of deception, Tom Brown's life trajectory is completely overturned. A meticulously planned operation of revelation is about to unfold. Want to know what happens next? Be sure to follow our channel for more. My name is Tom Brown, but everybody calls me TB. 8 years ago, I quit my high-paying corporate position to start my own firm. And it has been a roller coaster of success ever since. Vera has been the primary breadwinner for the past 24 years since we married. Working her way up the corporate ladder at a respected company where she works in education. She stays up to date on the latest technical breakthroughs and attends multiple training sessions every year. Vera is a real head-turner. At 46 she doesn't look a day over 30 and always gets noticed wherever she goes. You'd never realize that she's 58 in great shape. And weighs only 118 pounds. She's a mother of 2. Every day, she gets up before dawn to run 6 miles with her neighborhood running crew. Sarah, our 22-year-old FSU graduate, teaches first grade in Naples and shares her mother's love of running. She also appreciates my homebrewed beer and has joined a local beer club. I join her whenever I can. Our son Larry is in his final year at UF and wants to work for my company. But I told him he needs at least 5 years of outside experience first. Vera despises my brewing hobby and dislikes the scent. So I normally schedule my brewing sessions for when she has gone on business. She's supposed to be in Dallas right now. So I'll have plenty of time to work on a new batch of English brown ale. Life appeared wonderful. But I was soon to learn how deceiving appearances can be. One day, while waiting at the airport to pick up my friend Larry, a fellow member of my beer club, I observed some of Vera's co-workers from her company. Surprisingly, Vera was not present. I called her office number, which I rarely do, and her voicemail confirmed that she was supposed to be in Dallas. This mismatch puzzled me, so I told it to Larry, who advised I call Steve, another beer club member who also works as a detective. Before contacting Steve, I tried to call Vera, but she gave me a vague justification about needing to stay behind for work. That didn't sit well with me despite the late hour. I called Steve and expressed my concerns about Vera possibly cheating on me. He agreed to help and recommended Frank Jones, a private investigator, to look into the situation further. The next day, Frank called me, and we went over the problem in depth. He asked if I was sure I wanted to find potentially terrible realities and how far back he should look. Despite the emotional toll, I needed to know if I had been duped. Frank agreed to have someone in Dallas monitor Vera while his team investigated her training routine and contacts at home. I began my own investigation. I searched Vera's dresser, closet, bathroom, and every area of the house, but discovered nothing odd. Frank arrived later with surveillance equipment, and we installed cameras and recorders throughout the home and in Vera's car. We intended to catch her off guard by destroying the washing machine, preventing her from promptly washing her clothing. When she arrived that night, I couldn't sleep in our bed and ended up sleeping in Larry's room, tossing and turning with a worry-filled mind. The next morning, I followed my usual routine and went to work to clear my mind. Around lunchtime, Frank buzzed me, and we agreed to meet at my apartment. He arrived at 2:00 p.m. arms full of files. The Dallas detective had provided a complete report. Photos included. The narrative was tightening, and I readied myself for what those files might disclose. Frank gave me a photograph of 6 individuals having a nice time at a dinner table, 3 men and 3 women. Matched up, he asked if I recognized anyone. I peered hard at the picture and recognized Vera. He showed me some close-ups, and after a long look, I informed him that one of the males looked familiar, but I couldn't place him. Frank's next revelation was right out of a spy film. They had cameras set up in the hotel, observing the passageways and recording every movement. These photographs show the entire dining group exiting the restaurant, crammed into an elevator, and all getting off on the same floor. The ladies entered one room, while the men entered another just next door. On Friday morning, there was a photo showing two women leaving one room, two males leaving the other, and then all of them rushing through the lobby and out the door. They appeared to be colleagues or longtime friends. Nothing dodgy after visiting a local restaurant. They all settled their individual tabs and returned to the hotel to get their belongings and check out. Frank was looking at me as if he was going to unleash a bombshell. Wondering whether I was dead sure I wanted the complete package. Without missing a beat, I told him to lay it on me. He had another file, and as he guided me through it, I saw that the Dallas team had gone into those rooms with the cleaners and was shooting everything. Here's the kicker: the two rooms were connected. They swiped the sheets to capture DNA, used glasses to take prints, and sifted through the rubbish. I was prepared myself for whatever results the testing might produce. The waiting was the most difficult part. I never wanted to see how these bits and pieces could come together to form an image of Vera. The Dallas private investigator gave us a summary: those hotel rooms were a disaster. An obvious indication of a rough night. Referring to all 4 beds. The air was saturated with the aroma of sex. We are waiting for lab tests to corroborate the specifics. But I knew Vera wasn't just a stander. It felt like a hit in the gut. Realizing the lady I married could betray me in this way. So what happens next? Vera is coming home tonight. First things first. We have to sabotage the washing machine. That is our strategy to prevent her from washing away any proof. It felt fantastic to get my hands filthy. Cutting the cable. Perhaps a distraction to relieve the simmering wrath. In the kitchen, Frank is getting DNA samples when he asks for the children's hair. He digs through Vera's hairbrush, and a shiver goes down my spine. Could it be that he's simply marking off items off a checklist? But the prospect of my children not being mine is another level of betrayal. We've saved infant hair cuttings. One from each child. That should do the trick. Frank has another strategy: nab Vera's bags at the airport. Buy us some time while her purse is missing. She will be late. I'm all caught up in reporting it. That offers me space to clear my mind. Then the actual act begins. Can I give her a hug? Kiss her? Sit through her stories as if nothing was wrong? Can I take her out, sleep with her? Knowing what I know, it's a performance that may last for months while Frank's squad does its thing. Unravel Vera's secrets. Could I pull this off? Could I keep up the charade? Living with lies just to discover the truth? Replied Frank, yes, I have to. The truth is all that matters right now. Regardless of how long it takes or how painful it is. Frank's mind was already forming a strategy. He suggested that I go on a business trip to distract Vera and possibly catch her in the act if she was cheating. The thought hit me like a lightning bolt. I could visit a longtime client in St. Louis and inform Vera that I'd be gone from Monday to Thursday. It would appear completely routine. Why make the trip? I asked. Frank indicated that my absence could make Vera feel more relaxed and irresponsible. Especially if she was having an affair. We did not have any surveillance at her office. Frank wanted to bug something she usually kept with her. I racked my thoughts until something clicked: her briefcase. It wasn't ideal, but it was something. Frank gave me a little bug to plant that night. As he was leaving, he handed me one final duty check: Vera's undergarments for any indications of cheating. Keep it cool, he reminded me. I tried. But it seemed like walking a tightrope. Out on the deck nursing a porter. Aside from Vera's precise laundry regimen, I tried to figure out what else was off. Nothing occurred to me. Just as I was about to go inside, Frank called to report they had intercepted Vera's luggage. It was off to the laboratory. Remember to keep your head, he said. And that's what I focused on as I prepared for the evening's performance. Vera returned home, plainly fatigued from her trip and unhappy over the lost luggage. Particularly a couple of new trousers. But she still had the energy for a loving embrace and the typical "I missed you" routine. Once she went upstairs for her bath, I put the bug in her briefcase and attempted to unwind with some TV. My thoughts, on the other hand, continued repeating her entrance, looking for any indications that would reveal her identity. She seemed genuinely thrilled to be home, which added to the tension in my performance. I had to up my deceit game, or she'd read me like an open book. I put those thoughts away and prepared for bed, where we wound up wrapped in each other's arms. The customary post-trip ritual the next morning. Following my usual routine, I went to work to clear my mind around lunchtime. Frank buzzed me, and we agreed to meet at my apartment. He arrived at 2:00 p.m. arms full of files. The Dallas detective had provided a complete report. Photos included. The narrative was tightening, and I readied myself for what those files might disclose. Frank gave me a photograph of 6 individuals having a nice time at a dinner table, 3 men and 3 women. Matched up, he asked if I recognized anyone. I peered hard at the picture and recognized Vera. He showed me some close-ups, and after a long look, I informed him that one of the males looked familiar, but I couldn't place him. Frank's next revelation was right out of a spy film. They had cameras set up in the hotel, observing the passageways and recording every movement. These photographs show the entire dining group exiting the restaurant, crammed into an elevator, and all getting off on the same floor. The ladies entered one room, while the men entered another just next door. On Friday morning, there was a photo showing 2 women leaving one room, 2 males leaving the other, and then all of them rushing through the lobby and out the door. They appeared to be colleagues or longtime friends. Nothing suspicious. After visiting a local restaurant, they all settled their individual tabs and returned to the hotel to get their belongings and check out. Frank was looking at me as if he was going to unleash a bombshell, wondering whether I was dead sure I wanted the complete package. Without missing a beat, I told him to lay it on me. He had another file, and as he guided me through it, I saw that the Dallas team had gone into those rooms with the cleaners and was shooting everything. Here's the kicker: the 2 rooms were connected. They swiped the sheets to capture DNA, used glasses to take prints, and sifted through the rubbish. I was prepared myself for whatever results the testing might produce. The waiting was the most difficult part. I never wanted to see how these bits and pieces could come together to form an image of Vera. The Dallas private investigator gave us a summary: those hotel rooms were a disaster, an obvious indication of a rough night, referring to all 4 beds. The air was saturated with the aroma of sex. We are waiting for lab tests to corroborate the specifics, but I knew Vera wasn't just a stander. It felt like a hit in the gut, realizing the lady I married could betray me in this way. So what happens next? Vera is coming home tonight. First things first, we have to sabotage the washing machine. That is our strategy to prevent her from washing away any proof. It felt fantastic to get my hands filthy, cutting the cable. Perhaps a distraction to relieve the simmering wrath. In the kitchen, Frank is getting DNA samples when he asks for the children's hair. He digs through Vera's hairbrush, and a shiver goes down my spine. Could it be that he's simply marking off items off a checklist? But the prospect of my children not being mine is another level of betrayal. We've saved infant hair cuttings, 1 from each child. That should do the trick. Frank has another strategy: nab Vera's bags at the airport. Buy us some time while her purse is missing. She will be late. I'm all caught up in reporting it. That offers me space to clear my mind. Then the actual act begins. Can I give her a hug? Kiss her? Sit through her stories as if nothing was wrong? Can I take her out, sleep with her? Knowing what I know, it's a performance that may last for months while Frank's squad does its thing. Unravel Vera's secrets. Could I pull this off? Could I keep up the charade, living with lies just to discover the truth? Replied Frank, yes, I have to. The truth is all that matters right now, regardless of how long it takes or how painful it is. Frank's mind was already forming a strategy. He suggested that I go on a business trip to distract Vera and possibly catch her in the act if she was cheating. The thought hit me like a lightning bolt. I could visit a longtime client in St. Louis and inform Vera that I'd be gone from Monday to Thursday. It would appear completely routine. Why make the trip, I asked. Frank indicated that my absence could make Vera feel more relaxed and irresponsible, especially if she was having an affair. We did not have any surveillance at her office. Frank wanted to bug something she usually kept with her. I racked my thoughts until something clicked: her briefcase. It wasn't ideal, but it was something. Frank gave me a little bug to plant that night. As he was leaving, he handed me one final duty check: Vera's undergarments for any indications of cheating. Keep it cool, he reminded me. I tried, but it seemed like walking a tightrope. Out on the deck nursing a porter. Aside from Vera's precise laundry regimen, I tried to figure out what else was off. Nothing occurred to me. Just as I was about to go inside, Frank called to report they had intercepted Vera's luggage. It was off to the laboratory. Remember to keep your head, he said. And that's what I focused on as I prepared for the evening's performance. Vera returned home, plainly fatigued from her trip and unhappy over the lost luggage, particularly a couple of new trousers. But she still had the energy for a loving embrace and the typical "I missed you" routine. Once she went upstairs for her bath, I put the bug in her briefcase and attempted to unwind with some TV. My thoughts, on the other hand, continued repeating her entrance, looking for any indications that would reveal her identity. She seemed genuinely thrilled to be home, which added to the tension in my performance. I had to up my deceit game or she'd read me like an open book. I put those thoughts away and prepared for bed, where we wound up wrapped in each other's arms. The customary post-trip ritual: Saturday a.m. Vera was out cold, probably because she wasn't concerned about laundry chores due to the lost bags. I was sneaking a glance at her panties like a pervert, looking for indications of infidelity. Nothing stood out. They looked exactly like any other day's laundry. After my own shower, I made coffee and grabbed the paper to keep things normal. Vera entered the kitchen all smiles and well-rested, and I laid on the charm, giving her coffee and breakfast. She made a joke about her bags, and I forced myself to laugh along. Breakfast done, I went outside to tackle my to-do list. Vera emerged a little time later on her way to the store, and I informed her that I would be busy with the beer transfer. It's all about sticking to the customary routine, even when everything seems to be hanging by a thread. Dinner at our favorite Italian restaurant felt like a scene from a movie when the main characters pretend everything is fine. We talked about her trip, my forthcoming marathon in St. Louis, and the lost luggage, which she half hoped would remain lost so she could shop for more, except for her new slacks, which she liked. After dinner, I did my share by chatting about my current homebrew venture. It was a typical evening before a work trip. The journey to St. Louis was my time to think. And while I typically think about business, this time Vera was the only thing on my mind. I called Frank from the road to catch up on the weekend and get a sense of his thinking. There was no news yet, but he vowed to remain in touch as the miles passed. I needed Frank's unvarnished opinion. He did not sugarcoat it. He and Joe in Dallas both assumed Vera was in trouble. Likely for years. It wasn't a one-time event. These people knew each other too well. Their relaxed demeanor, the way they conducted themselves, everything hinted at a long-standing relationship. Frank claimed that outside of those hotel rooms, the six of them were just pals. However, once the doors were closed, the situation changed. They knew how to maintain appearances. And that was what hurt the most. It was a long-term act, and I had no idea. Frank's final piece of advice was to call and decide what I was going to do about Vera and the whole situation. That's when I asked my lawyer Mike for the contact information for the greatest divorce attorney nearby. When I brought him up to speed, he stated Dave Ford would get in touch. It's strange how life may take unexpected turns. One day you're talking about homebrew and dinner plans, and the next you're meeting with divorce lawyers to discuss the end of a marriage you once felt was bulletproof. I called my attorney Mike Davidson and asked for the name of the top divorce attorney in the state. I gave him a brief update, and he said he would have Dave Ford contact me. I checked into my hotel in St. Louis and made the regular call home to Vera to let her know I arrived safely. Everything appeared regular, but behind the surface, I was laying the pieces of another game. I checked in with Fred about our golf plans, attempting to preserve the normal routine of a business vacation. Frank called me later that night checking in. I informed him that his and Dave Ford's reputation preceded them, and that I was prepared for whatever came next. It was no longer a defensive play. I was prepared to take the field. The following day was a flurry of green fairways with Fred, providing a momentary getaway. Frank's noon call on Wednesday left me with an open schedule and ready to return home the next morning. When Dave Ford, the attorney, and I finally spoke, I informed him of the situation. He praised the strategy and recognized Frank's investigation abilities. Dave's primary inquiry was about my intentions, which I explained clearly. If Vera cheats, I'll file for divorce. However, I needed the entire picture from Frank's investigation to determine how far I wanted to strike back against Vera and her hidden gang. Dave explained the legal environment, stating that a no-fault divorce in Georgia might be quick and inexpensive, especially now that our children were grown, and adultery accusations would not provide any meaningful advantage. There was a lot to process, and I needed time to consider my alternatives for how to approach the divorce, whether to strike hard or take the road of least resistance. The talk with Dave served as a harsh reminder of the legal and emotional minefield I was about to travel. Frank and Steve unexpectedly arrived in my hotel room. I realized something huge was going on. Frank's expression was serious as he prepared to deliver the news, and having Steve present suddenly felt like a must. A lifeline when Frank broke the silence. His comments slammed like a freight train. The test findings were in, and they verified Vera's involvement in that heinous hotel incident. It was damning. Vera, like the other women, had been with all three males. My heart fell as Frank recounted they compared the DNA from Vera's hair to the evidence on the beds. I was reeling, caught in deafening quiet, my thoughts racing as I sought to process the treachery. But the following discovery wounded the worst. Frank's tone was uncertain as he informed me that neither of my children were biologically mine. The scream that burst from my throat was more than shock. 24 years of trust, love and memories were shattered in a moment. As I stood there pacing and yelling, I was scarcely aware of Frank and Steve's presence. My ideal world was obliterated, not just collapsed. What am I expected to do now? Every strategy, every next action, appeared meaningless against the backdrop of a facade that lasted over 2 decades. I found myself caught up in a maelstrom of emotions, struck by disbelief and beaten by treachery. The discovery of Life丨Veiled and Vera's decades-long deception was more than just bad news. Everything I thought I knew about my life had changed dramatically. The shock triggered a series of emotions ranging from disbelief to cold hard resolve. Frank was correct to give this news in person, and Steve's participation was not solely for support. It was a crucial anchor to keep me grounded in the calm following the storm. Time seemed to stand still as Steve, Frank, and I discussed my alternatives. They guided me, and I focused on a road forward, determined that this betrayal would come at a high cost to everyone concerned. Sleep was a faraway stranger that night, but their presence kept me grounded and prevented me from sinking into despair. My decision became clear. I would make sure that everyone involved in this lie paid dearly. My divorce from Vera would not be a peaceful getaway. It would be a public disclosure of her betrayal. And while it would bring my own grief to the forefront, it would reveal the years of lies that had defined my life in Georgia. A no-fault divorce sounded like an easy way to end things, but suddenly it felt too quiet, too mild given the gravity of Vera's treachery. The simple method of filing, waiting a month, and then dividing what we previously shared appeared insufficient. The evidence we were gathering would support a different ending, one in which the truth would not be hidden under the illusion of mutual consent but would be exposed for all to see. When faced with the reality of Vera's infidelity, I was torn between the satisfaction of a lengthy legal struggle and the pragmatic approach of a no-fault divorce. The visceral impulse to confront Vera and her collaborators in court conflicted with Steve, Frank and Dave's advice, all of which suggested the latter. It was a plan that promised efficiency and reduced financial hardship, the possibility of saving time and money while exposing Vera's infidelity. which eventually drew me in back in Atlanta. We gathered in Frank's conference room to lay out the information we had, determine what we still needed, and plan the most effective form of vengeance. Vera had not screwed up during my trip to St. Louis. But the Gang of Six past behavior told a different narrative. Their booking patterns for connecting rooms, as well as the varied combinations of members attending these excursions, indicated a systematic treachery. My rage boiled over at the prospect of their deception. I demanded that Frank delve deeper into their lives. I wanted detailed profiles including marital status, children, paternity, employment, and addresses. The plan was emerging to completely shatter the illusion of their private lives, just as they had mine. It wasn't simply about legal retaliation anymore, it was about exposing a deception that had lasted over 25 years. A strange thought emerged in my head: reveal Vera's adultery on our 25th wedding anniversary. Frank, knowing her work schedule, planned a surveillance operation to apprehend her. And while it wouldn't stand up in court, I needed to learn the truth for myself. The appropriate moment for the big revelation was approaching. A class Vera was teaching in Orlando, which ended just before our anniversary. When I briefed everyone, I dropped the bombshell: it was going to be our anniversary. But not the type that included cake. This was game-changing for me. No more being the naive husband, it was time to introduce Vera and her affair companions to what happens if you mess with me. I was prepared to turn the tables and make them experience the misery they had created. Update: Frank just brought us the most recent information from Dave's office. And it's like something out of a soap opera. Vera and her co-workers have been sneaking around for more than 20 years. Dating back to when they first started at their workplace. They have mastered their secret lives. They just had a labor class in Washington, D.C., where Frank's team revealed their nefarious scheme. Vera and Henry had rooms adjacent to one another. They were extremely discreet about it, never giving anyone reason to suspect anything. They fanned out throughout the hotel, making sure they weren't observed entering each other's rooms during the day. They pretended to be regular co-workers, but at night, they would steal away to their secret chambers. They only did it late at night before anyone was up, save on special nights like Saturdays and Thursdays. Their performance was convincing. During the day they discussed ordinary matters like where they were staying, what they were eating, their children, and their spouses. No one would have guessed these were the same folks having secret trysts at night. They'd been playing this game for 24 years, concealing everything right under everyone's nose. Frank's crew, along with the hotel's cleaning service, gathered the necessary evidence. The aftermath of the interactions in those connecting rooms yielded a large amount of DNA evidence. The bed sheets were drenched with the Gang of Six DNA, as were the personal possessions they had left behind. I painted an undeniable picture. George and Chuck's unintentional paternity of Emily and Kent was confirmed. Their genetic markers are undeniably evident in the collected material. The reality of their acts, formerly shrouded in secret, was now exposed in the most unmistakable way. George C. Thomas, who lived in Richmond, Virginia, with his wife and 2 adult children, was about to have his world turned upside down with the discovery of his additional daughter. Similar to Langford Chuck in Columbia, South Carolina, who had a strong marriage with his high school love, was about to be astonished when his additional child was discovered. Henry with his twins in Little Rock, Arkansas. Joyce is reaching her silver anniversary in Miami, Florida, while Catherine's family lives in Knoxville, Tennessee. Their seemingly blissful lives reflected my own empty perfection before the truth was revealed. The Gang of Six had fooled everyone. They had been pretending to be blissfully married for nearly 23 years. But their little ruse was about to fail. Seeing my own life fall apart was merely a foreshadowing of the disaster that was going to strike them. Things were becoming more difficult by the minute. We were now wondering who had actually fathered Joyce and Catherine's children. It seemed highly likely that the fathers were members of their secret society. Frank was rushing against the clock to uncover the truth with answers needed by next Wednesday. The air in Dave's office was thick with revelations. Vera's work trip to Orlando was only a prelude to our anniversary. And she couldn't care less about our 25-year marriage. My first amazement was quickly followed by a cold hard look at the realities of our connections. Henry turned out to be the father of Joyce's daughter and Catherine's son. George and Chuck had fathered Catherine's daughters. Joyce remained the only one who had a child with her husband. A single thread of fidelity in an otherwise convoluted story of infidelity. After processing all of this knowledge, I began to feel a chilly determination. Pretending to be a loving husband while plotting Vera's demise was like playing a dark game. I had overcome my despair and fury. And now I was all about being strategic. Just a little longer. And I could deliver the bombshell. It was twisted. As if everything were okay. Vera had maintained her deception for 24 years. So I believed I could do the same for a few months. I've never been the sort to play this type of game. But suddenly it felt like it was time for payback. Frank's squad was preparing for surveillance in San Diego. But I was focused on Orlando. That's where I'd reveal what Vera and her gang of 6 had been up to. Her decision to stay there rather than come home for our anniversary demonstrated how little she cared. The proposal for Orlando was audacious. I'd surprise everyone by turning up as the instructor on Wednesday and telling the truth in front of everyone. Dave and his crew were setting the legal framework for the big day as it approached. Dave, Frank, Steve. And I went over everything to make sure we covered every possible scenario. Frank's team would be watching the gang of 6 for any last-minute developments. I was preparing for the battle. This wasn't merely to expose Vera and her buddies, it was about making a significant statement. I was going to take charge and change everything. And they had no idea what was coming on Saturday. After Vera had left, I called the spouses of her 6 friends. I created an elaborate cover narrative to invite Vera's co-conspirator spouses to Orlando. I told them I was arranging a surprise 25th wedding anniversary party and wanted them to be a part of it. I booked their flights and hotels, stating that it was my treat next. I invited Kent and Emily to Orlando as well, under the idea of surprising their mother when they came. I sat them down and revealed Vera's infidelity and the fact that I was not their biological father. It was an emotional conversation, filled with emotions and hugs. They asked many questions, and I answered them all honestly. I choked back tears as I made them pledge not to reveal anything to Vera. Kent, when asked if I could ever forgive Vera, and Emily, who was urgently trying to make sense of everything, recommended we go to counseling. I took a big breath and urged them to put themselves in my place, imagining that the person they loved most had been lying to them their entire lives. I wanted them to understand why forgiveness was hard for me. Finally, I told them that it was their decision to be present when I confronted Vera, but that my love for them would never alter. I asked them to visualize a perfect life with their family, as if it were a scene from a beautiful movie, with everything just right. Great work, amazing children, family holidays, and soccer sessions. I then asked them to imagine a new kind of movie in which their spouse was in a hotel room, not with them but with other individuals, committing painful betrayals. I painted a clear picture of their spouse overjoyed for reasons that would destroy them. I turned to Kent and asked, "Do you believe your wife truly loves you?" I asked Emily how she would feel if her husband was one of the men in that room. As they contemplated the situation, their eyes welled up with tears before proceeding. I paused to reflect on the gravity of the situation. Then I told the toughest truth: this was not a one-time event, it had been going on for 24 years and occurred 4 times a year. I have videos to prove it. I informed them straight. Now it's not even a mile from here, they are probably filming another one of those scenes. I questioned how they would feel if they realized they were not the biological parents of their children, or if Emily's husband fathered children with someone else. It was a difficult reality for them to grasp. I mentioned that the person they thought loved them was sacrificing family time to spend more time with these folks. It wasn't only about the cheating, it was about a completely secret life. I mentioned how their mother would extend her journeys for these rendezvous and then need a day to recover before rejoining her family. What kind of love, respect, and concern does she demonstrate for her family? I asked. Vera's actions had badly hurt all of us. Kent, attempting to hold back tears, stated that he had never seen it that way before. He realized he would not want to be treated that way by his wife and recognized the enormous grief it had caused me. "I love you, Dad," he murmured, still unsure whether he could handle the conversation. Emily, on the other hand, refused to give up. She was outraged and eager to support me, telling Kent that he needed to stand by us because Mom had chosen them over us, which made things click for Kent. I was moved by her passion and commitment, and I felt an incredible love for both of my children. Emily was curious about the plans for the next day, so I mentioned that I had invited the gang of 6 as spouses who believed they were attending a celebration of our 25th wedding anniversary. It was going to be a shock for them, and I planned to expose all of the proof. By the way, I should mention that you have some half-siblings who you might wish to meet someday. I wanted Vera's affair to be disclosed in the most effective way possible, forcing her and her friends to confront the consequences directly from their own families. The final update: the other spouses from the gang of 6 arrived at the hotel, and we had a nice lunch getting to know one another. Then at 2:00 p.m. Kent and I went to Vera's class, which was waiting for us in the hotel lobby. There was a lawyer from Dave's business, a private investigator from Frank's team, and a filmmaker to document everything. At 2:30 p.m. a florist delivered the 25 red roses I had requested. Emily and the other women admired them, but I could tell Emily was prepared for action. I had to remind her to be cool since I was planning how this would unfold. We proceeded to the meeting rooms at 2:45 p.m. Emily was eager. Kent stayed close to her, and the other husbands were filled with anticipation. At 3:00 p.m. I stepped into Vera's classroom, accompanied by the roses and the videographer. Vera's face turned scarlet when she saw me. I joked about it and the room laughed. Vera forced a grin and presented me to the class as her beloved husband. Standing in front of them, I locked eyes with each member of the gang of 6, who were strategically dispersed to escape detection. Turning back to Vera, I began my spiel about making the day special for our forthcoming 25th wedding anniversary. Before I could finish, Emily and the rest of the surprise group entered the room, and the photographer captured the exact moment, including Vera's shock and her affair partner's distress. I couldn't help but smile as I watched the events unfold. Emily, motivated by righteous indignation, took command. After introducing Vera to the spouses of her affair partners, I continued my announcement by mentioning the forthcoming company anniversary, emphasizing that Vera and her colleagues had all started about the same time. I staged the situation like a director preparing for a great finale. "John, Henry, Chuck, Joyce, Catherine, please come up to join us," I called out. They hesitated but made their way to the front of the room, attempting to remain composed as the rest of the class applauded. Emily stood behind me, unaware of the true purpose for their appearance, her expression a mix of determination and anticipation. I took Emily by the arm and led her to George. "Emily, meet your biological father, George Thomas," I announced. Vera's face turned ghostly white, and George's wife demanded I repeat what I had just said. "George is Emily's biological father," I spoke again, this time louder and more deliberately. George, evidently disturbed, inquired as to how I could be so confident. The attorney was standing by, and someone handed me a folder. I pulled out 3 documents and handed the first to George. "I am requesting a court-ordered paternity test," I indicated. Then I handed him the second document, which stated, "I am suing you for 21 years of back child support and emotional damages." Finally, I handed him the third document. "This is a lawsuit against your employer because they failed to enforce the morals provision in your contract. I already have DNA findings from an independent lab that establish your biological relationship to Emily. The court-ordered test is only a formality." I turned to George's wife and said, "I have copies of all of the evidence for you to use however you see fit." The place erupted into turmoil. The other couples who had previously been uninformed of the true motive for the gathering were shocked. Kent moved forward, standing erect and bowing in acknowledgement, and I felt a sense of grim satisfaction. We moved on to Chuck and I repeated the procedure. "I can't meet your biological father. Charles Kent Nixon," I said when Chuck's middle name was mentioned. The room fell into an unsettling stillness. The attorney handed me another set of paperwork, which I reviewed with Chuck in the same way that I did with George. Chuck's wife also asked for copies of the proof. The initial shock had subsided, and most people assumed the drama was only about Vera and her 2 children. But I had a greater surprise planned for the rest of them, which left Vera sobbing uncontrollably. I called everyone's attention once more. "This isn't what you were expecting," when I stepped in. "But wait, we are just getting started." The room grew hushed as I laid everything out, exposing the Gang of 6 24-year pattern of cheating on work trips. I documented the parentage of all the children involved, removing any doubt about the web of lies and deception that had been built over the years. The room erupted into chaos as the reality of the situation became clear. I distributed all legal documents, ensuring that the spouses received copies. The Gang of 6 had nowhere to hide when I delivered Vera the divorce papers. I made it clear that we were finished. No calls, no visits, and no attempts to reconcile. After everything had calmed down and I'd gone to my hotel room, I reflected on how things had turned out. Emily had ruined my well-laid preparations by insisting on confronting her biological father right then. My script was tossed out the window. But it didn't matter. I had exposed the Gang of 6, humiliated them publicly, and the truth had been revealed. It was a horrible, painful day, but it signaled the end of a long, difficult chapter in my life. After serving them with legal papers and leaving them to face their outraged partners, I began to feel relieved. Then a knock at my door brought me face to face with Emily and Kent. They had previously supported their mother, but now they were with me, offering embraces and words of encouragement. Emily, despite being hurt and angry, shone a fresh strength. She informed me she was going to take Vera home for a bit. Despite everything she felt responsible to her mother, Emily's strength and resolve were unfamiliar to me. She was determined and fierce, and I knew Vera would be in good hands with her. Kent shared his anguish and love as he rode back with me, looking for some routine in the middle of upheaval. As Emily left to go see her mother, assuring me of her love, Kent lingered, and we had a few beers, a father and son trying to navigate unfamiliar territory. It's been 5 years since the Gang of 6 was revealed, and their world came crashing down. They all lost their jobs and had ugly divorces. They seem to always be attempting to escape their history. Every time they find a decent job, their past catches up with them, and they are back at square one. They are striving to mend their connections with their children, but it's a difficult battle. Their ex-partners want nothing to do with them except to provide financial support on occasion. After everything happened, I couldn't stay in our old house with all of its sad memories. I booked into a motel and began searching for a new location to call home. Kent returned to Atlanta with me but did not stay long. He's thriving in Dallas, climbing the career ladder and enjoying life. But he keeps his distance from Vera, only interacting with her on occasion. Emily is more in touch with him, and they talk frequently. The children have suffered the most as a result of the Gang of 6. Trust concerns persist, and I wonder if Kent will ever settle down. Emily has dealt with Vera in her own manner, refusing to accept excuses or lies. We've all found solace in those who have been through comparable circumstances. The kids have even bonded with their half-siblings, and we are organizing a reunion in Nashville soon. It turns out Emily and Kent's names are related to their biological fathers, which further added to the shock when everything was revealed. Their connection with Vera is rocky at best. I've moved on from Vera. We finalized our divorce fast. She remained in the house, and I used George and Chuck's money to establish trusts for Emily and Kent. I did not want their money, but I did want them to face the repercussions of their conduct. I've been dating, wanting to meet someone new to share my life with. I still believe in love and look forward to the day when I will have grandchildren to spoil. Life does not stop for anyone, and you must keep moving forward. No matter how painful it is. Emily and Kent needed me. And I needed to be there for them. Life moves on. And so do I. Looking forward to what comes next and always remembering that cheating never results in anything positive. Payback as well. I hope you enjoy that story. Here is another one. I won't go into detail about how I met and attracted my wife. Marcy, I'll just state that we met in high school. Fell madly in love. And married as soon as I obtained a job. We've been married for 18 years and have a 17-year-old daughter named Jessica. Do the math for yourself. 2 years later we welcomed twin sons. Brian and Baxter. Life was fine and I wasn't whining. But I was the only one. Marcy seemed to have been unhappy for quite some time now. Today I was privileged to learn about all of this. I was the lone electronic data processing manager at a small manufacturing company. I held that role for 10 years. I had grander aspirations too. And every evening and most weekends, I worked with my best friend Elton to create a computer server system that would allow for instant communication across long distances. Despite the fact that software development seemed to outstrip our hardware efforts, Elton and I were able to build a small, compact device that was nearly ready for production. Unfortunately, we were not moving quickly enough to salvage my marriage. Today was the day Marcy decided to deliver the awful news. John, it's quite simple. The only thing I'm asking for is $500 per month in child support. You can keep the house furniture. And everything else. She'd been explaining everything to me for the past 15 minutes. And I'd listened to almost nothing. I apologize for interrupting you. But $500 seems a little small to me for 3 kids. Marcy gave an intermittent sigh. John. It's solely for Jessica. And it'll last till she is 18. I'm trying to be fair. And I believe $500 is reasonable. How about the boys? Don't take them there. Of course I take them, however. Because you are not their father. You are not required to pay child support for them. I'm astonished you didn't realize this years ago. I guess that demonstrates how stupid I was. No. I did not figure it out. It had never occurred to me that the boys might not be mine. She was now telling me that she not only wanted a divorce but that she had been cheating on me for the past 16 years. What more didn't I know? My thoughts started to stray again. She kept talking. And I tried to piece together the information. Okay. Hell, okay, I will consent to almost anything. The only thing I require is that Jessica accompany me every weekend and on all school vacations. Including summer break, I said. Marcy was silent for a moment, then replied. I can live with that if Jessica consents. I'll get the papers ready tomorrow. Will you sign them then? I understood she was about to leave. I hadn't known it. But she'd been progressively moving her belongings out over the last few weeks. Just a few questions before you leave, please. Who the hell is the twins' father? Who will you live with finally? Why did you wait so long? I asked. Langford King is Brian and Baxter's father. We are all planning to move into his home. As for his wife, Joyce fled with the girls after catching me and Langford in bed. Their marriage was over. I hadn't asked for a divorce previously because Langford was still married. And I had no other option. But now that he's getting divorced, it appears reasonable to me, Marcy explained. You slept with Langford for 16 years, that's correct. I have no intention of quitting. I apologize, John. You're a nice person. But you're just mediocre in bed. And I'm afraid you will have to work for the rest of your life just to get by. Langford is wealthy, successful, and an excellent sexual partner. I only have one life. And I want to live it to the fullest. You cannot offer me that, she said. I had no response to that. I watched her walk out the door, opened a cool drink, and sat in my 300-shade lounge chair. Drinking a cheap beer. I had enormous plans. But that's where they ended. I believe what crushed my feelings for her was when she compared my sexual performance to Langford's. There's not much you can do about situations like that. You either understand it or don't. I was usually satisfied, but Marcy didn't seem to be. We had known Langford and Joyce since high school. Foster King, Langford's father, had been the carpet king of our town for as long as I can remember. He retired to Florida around 10 years ago. And his only son now runs the business. Many of us got together frequently for barbecues, picnics and other gatherings. Marcy and Langford were always amicable to one another, but not more so than the other members. Langford gradually distanced himself from our group as his bank account expanded. We'd only seen them 2 or 3 times in the last few years. At least I did. They had 2 lovely teenage children who were friends with Jessica. Speaking of Jessica, she was a bright spot in my otherwise chaotic existence. She was short, humorous and lovely. She always put a grin on my face. Unlike her brothers, she worked hard and excelled academically. All she desired was a high set score and admittance to a prestigious institution. I tried everything I could to help her. Brian and Baxter were the extreme opposites. They weren't just uninterested in learning, they also refused to participate in sports. I attempted to incorporate them in my computer projects multiple times but was unsuccessful. The majority of my interactions with them were preventative or corrective in nature. I was fixing the problem. But their mother overpowered me. Now I could see why Marcy had always been a decent wife. She never rejected me sexually and frequently initiated it herself. She kept the house neat and wasn't demanding. She was an excellent mother and a wife I could be proud of. It turns out she was also an excellent actress. I was starting my 3rd long neck when Jessica arrived home from school. There was no telling when the boys might return. They routinely skipped dinner a couple of times a week. And Marcy never complained. I gave up debating about it long ago. "Hey Dad, what are you doing at home? Where's Mom?" Jessica asked. I struggled out of the chair and collected my empty belongings. "Your mother invited me to come home for lunch today to inform me she wanted a divorce." I said, my words slurring. I did not know how to drink, but there I was, drinking in the middle of the day. Jessica took the bottles from me and carried them to the kitchen. "Didn't you guess, Dad?" she asked, taking off her shoes and collapsing to the floor. "What will happen now? You and the lads will reside with your mother in the Langford King house. The home above the hill. Your mother has always desired to be wealthy. Apparently. It is not a mansion, it's merely a large old house that his father built years ago." We sat silently for a few moments. "You already know that I am not your brother's father." I said yes. Brian and Baxter frequently laugh about it. My mother must have told them years ago. Every time you bother them about something, they take it and then go elsewhere and chuckle. So that explains a lot, doesn't it? "How did you know all of this?" I asked. I had known for years but didn't want to say anything. "I did not want to upset you because you appeared to be content," Jessica replied. "Elizabeth and Carla notified me a few weeks ago that they were moving to Lancaster. Their mother discovered Mom and Mr. King sharing the same bed. I figured something was going to happen." "You might have mentioned it," I said. "I do not think so," Jessica responded. There was quiet for a moment. "I would rather be here with you. You'll need help around the house. But that is not going to happen. The court will not allow it, however." I was able to reach a compromise. "And how will this work?" "You will stay here every weekend. All school vacation including summers." "That's something I can arrange. Why don't you go take a shower? And I'll order some pizza while we eat," I suggested. Jessica put out her breakup strategy. She was supposed to come over to our place on Friday after school and remain until Monday morning when she went back to school. I thought it was greater than I could have dreamed. We were still talking about the details when the phone rang. "John, I just wanted to let you know that the boys arrived and will be staying the night tomorrow while you are at work. The kids and I will move our belongings here. They can afford to skip one day of school. Jessica can spend the evening determining what she wants to take and leave behind. I see no reason why we can't begin a new life right now." I found myself alone in the house and truthfully, I was relieved. I was having trouble focusing on my work because I was constantly trying to figure out where I had gone wrong. The fact that I was continually berating myself for not knowing anything about my wife's relationship with a close friend didn't help matters. Elton and his wife Beth provided me a shoulder to weep on, which I gladly welcomed. The obvious answer was alcohol, but I opted against it instead. I began spending additional time on the server project. Beth was not pleased that Elton was working longer hours than usual, and I had to send him home several times. The divorce papers were filed, and Jessica began spending weekends with me. She tried not to speak negatively about her mother, but she never seemed to have anything positive to say. She seemed unhappy by how much time I spent working on the server, but she didn't complain. She did the laundry and other domestic chores that Marcy was unable to complete. It wasn't my intention to use her in that way, but she looked pleased to have something to do other than study for exams. I always made time to eat lunch with her. Near the end of spring things became better. Jessica was accepted to the University of Oregon and granted permission to study high school abroad in Spain. She was concerned that Marcy would not let her go for whatever reason, but she needed her consent. I didn't understand her fear until I realized she hadn't informed her mother about her college applications or her request for an exchange program. Jessica, at my recommendation, requested that her mother sign the permission paperwork for the trip overseas, presenting it as a class vacation with no further specifics. Marcy signed the document without glancing at it. The following week we applied for a passport. My divorce was finalized. Langford was still battling with Joyce over his assets. Marcy had transferred all rights to the house to me, but I had no idea what I was going to do with them. While Elton and I finished the server build, Beth used her computer abilities to produce a nice presentation. We created a slideshow and had handouts professionally printed. A week later, we secured a contract to offer a hardware system to the State Traffic Commission, as well as a large check. I had to quit my work to complete everything because I no longer had a family. Solid employment was not as important. Elton, on the other hand, couldn't afford to give up his day job, so he worked nights and weekends to get things operating. Beth appeared more supportive at this point. We had no issue hiring college students to assist with the installation. Wireless technology appeared to simplify everything, and all of the equipment was assembled using off-the-shelf components. 6 weeks later, we had a fully functioning system. There were a few problems, but the consumer was overjoyed. 2 days later, the State Department of Corrections called to schedule a meeting. Elton quit his job and Beth announced her pregnancy. The second contract ran much more smoothly. Several students had graduated and were delighted to be recruited full-time. Elton went without me for a week while I took my daughter to Barcelona. I needed a vacation, and Jessica felt better when I was present. Marcy was outraged when she learned about the trip and when I stopped giving her child support payments. I could easily afford to pay them, but I wanted to annoy her. All I had to do was wait another 5 months until Jessica turned 18. We were getting more questions than we had time to answer. I became the primary contact and was always on the road. Elton conducted much of his business from home. We had to rent a little office, and Beth quickly took over. She was pleased that I spent most of my time traveling. Beth needed to employ an office assistant and train them in time for the baby's arrival, so we also hired an attorney. Things were going better than we could have expected. Our legal beagle suggested we form a company, but he outsourced the work to a professional firm in Philadelphia. The house grew lonely again. I could go a few days without Jessica because I knew she'd be around on weekends. Now, I spent a lot of time sending emails and making international phone calls. I suppose keeping busy saved me from thinking about my loneliness. I had not heard from Marcy or the boys. I spent Christmas in Spain with my daughter. Everything was excellent. Jessica was scheduled to return home in 4 months before heading to Oregon for college. When I wasn't traveling, I could easily establish a ritual every morning. I ate breakfast at the same diner. It was only a few weeks before I became a regular. When I wasn't thinking about the project, I was mostly worrying about what went wrong in my marriage. The more I thought about it, the bitterer I became. I needed a sense of accomplishment. My wife had been embarrassing me for 15 years. How could I leave it unchecked? A little item on the third page of the morning paper gave me hope. Philip Hughes sued King Carpets for unfair termination. Philip had been the general manager of King Carpets for more than a decade. He worked for Foster King before retiring and remained there. Foster King, by all accounts, was an honest man who managed an honest business. Langford, on the other hand, had a slightly different approach to business. Philip refused to put up with Langford's bad labor and merchandise after he protested. Langford fired him. The lawsuit was weak and had a small prospect of success. I decided that I wanted to meet Mr. Hughes. My bank account was larger than ever. Jessica had found a job at the institution, and I had already paid for my first year of tuition. Everything was going perfectly nicely. I hadn't heard from Marcy in months. She had no idea how well the new business was doing or even that it existed. It only took me 15 minutes to persuade Philip Hughes to abandon his claim against Langford King. He'd wanted to establish his own rug business for years but lacked the necessary funds and resources. Elton was more than prepared to contribute half the sum. Both he and Beth believed it would be a wise investment. Aside from King Carpets, the only competition would be the two huge home improvement businesses in the region. Philip was convinced that by providing excellent customer service and pricing, he could compete with them. Elton and I liked Hughes, so we let him work on his own with our financial support. 6 months later, Empire Carpet Company was fully functioning and profitable. During the same period, Elton and I grew the company into a 6th state. Our server technology proved to be an ideal solution for most government organizations with various offices. We never needed to advertise. The company flourished on its own, and we were quickly assimilated. It was difficult to tell whether we were delighted or frustrated. The nicest part of the entire experience were the monthly checks, which just kept coming. Brian and Baxter were arrested for dealing cocaine. Most of the transactions occurred at their high school. It took our attorney more than half a day to persuade the authorities that I was no longer liable for their acts. By the end of the day, documentation had been filed, which relieved me of all parental responsibility for both of them. Marcy called me that evening to scold me for my activities. I hung up and disconnected the phone. They would reach 18 in a few months and would be responsible for their own lives. I would raise them, but I never loved them. After receiving 2 inquiries from the magnificent state of California, Serpentine Enterprises of Palo Alto made a formal offer to purchase our modest firm. We had been in business for a little more than 2 years when they offered us $60 million in cash plus stock options in the company. We quickly accepted the deal. Elton decided to continue with the company for a preposterous pay but had to relocate to San Francisco. Beth threatened to divorce him if he did not accept. 3 of our young engineers became millionaires before the age of 25. I chose to retire. The realtor had just finished placing a for sale sign in the front yard when a van arrived in the driveway. It was one of those custom-built models with a unique wheelchair ramp affixed to the side. I observed from the porch as a beautiful Latina woman approached the driver's door and activated the ramp mechanism. It was clear she'd done this hundreds of times before. Less than a minute later, an older man whom I recognized as Foster King was already rolling a motorized cart along the pavement. He couldn't drive any further because of the porch steps. So I stepped over to say hello. Do you know who I am? Young gentleman. I was flattered to be addressed as a young man. Perhaps this was his way of taking me off guard. Of course I recognized you from the TV advertising. You have truly aged. My cheekiness made me smirk slightly. He approached me with a gloomy expression, which seemed to disappear when I made an obviously stupid comment about his age. He swayed the wagon briefly before startling me again. I need a beer. Do you have any cool beer in a bottle? Not one of those darn cans. There are a few Foster's bottles in the refrigerator. Do you want to come inside? Or should I bring them over here? Simply relax. Maya could bring them over. Have a seat. We need to talk. Maya walked around me while I sat on the porch stairs. I had to admit that the old man caught my interest. But so did Maya. She wore a white blouse and black leggings. The pants weren't especially tight, but they did show off a lovely figure. She couldn't be considered petite, but she was in good shape. Easy boy. I thought to myself, she will be right back. Foster King caught me glancing at his companion and took the chance to make a remark. I apologize, I do not mean to offend. But she is quite attractive. Why in the hell do you think I hired her? Hopefully to seduce me. Dream on, young man. She is more of a woman than you can manage. We both chuckled as Maya reappeared with long necks. When we immediately came to a halt, she gave us both a happy expression. Mr. King, didn't you come here to drink my beer? What can I do for you? Maya half sat and half stood with one foot on the porch railing. He caught my eye again and hummed. You're causing me a lot of trouble, Mr. Terrell. Profits from my firm contribute significantly to my retirement income, and that revenue has been steadily falling recently. I've discovered that you could be the reason. I'd like to give you an opportunity to explain yourself before placing an order. You killed. Now Foster, please behave yourself. You promised me not to engage in such nonsense. Apologize to Mr. Terrell. Maya spoke for the first time since they arrived. I anticipated her to have an accent. Yet she spoke great English. Damn. She will not allow me to have any fun. Foster drank what was remained in the bottle in one gulp. I apologize, John. I was simply attempting to attract your attention. I promise you will not have any fun. He finished the phrase in a faux Italian accent and grinned slightly. Who were you chatting to before you approached me? Just. I ate dinner last night with my son and the scraggly girl he's sleeping with. He claims you are to blame for all of the trouble. It was difficult to get any data out of him since he kept suggesting you were trying to get retribution for something. I eventually grew sick of him and left early. I did not even get to see my granddaughters. I was expecting you'd offer me with facts rather than BS. Before I could say anything, Maya moved away from the rail and murmured something into Foster's ear. He smacked his hand on the cart's handle. This explains it. Why didn't you tell me last night? Maya, sometimes I wonder what I am paying you for, Mr. Terrell. You're paying me because I'm the only one willing to put up with you. I didn't understand the woman who left with my son was your ex-wife. I apologize for labeling her vile. Frankly, I don't understand why you're upset with my son for taking her. I believe you should thank him. I assume you didn't like her. Not necessarily. She pouted. She somewhat pouted when I asked Langford where my granddaughters were. Joyce and the daughters are currently staying with her parents in Lancaster. Joyce is somebody you know well. I consider her a good friend. I cannot say the same about your son. That's all very interesting. But I need to go back to business. What I came here for, Mr. King. Have you spoken with Philip Hughes yet? I inquired. No, why would I? Can he be trusted if so? Don't you believe he could provide better answers? Foster sat silently wondering. Maya. Sometimes I wonder what I am paying you for, he said. And she responded. You're paying me because I'm the only one willing to put up with you. I am leaving immediately tomorrow. I'll talk to Philip and go see my granddaughters. Foster King was a determined individual. He steered the cart toward the driveway before Maya could stand up. She grinned at me as she hurried to catch up. I hope to see her again, I thought to myself. Suddenly, I remembered how long it had been since I had been intimate with someone. Maya expertly maneuvered Foster into the van and exited before the door closed. He stared at me. Do not leave town, John Terrell. We still have business to attend to. I found the visit informative. After taking another sip of beer, I took a long and chilly shower. I supposed Maya had gotten to me. She was probably already married or with a young man. But I could still fantasize in the evening. My ex-wife paid me an unexpected visit. John. What the hell are you doing? Langford said you were behind the Empire Code fiasco. I told him it was a mistake. But he says you're trying to drive him out of business. King Carpet Company has been in our community since we were children. I know nothing about the carpet industry. So why do you think I had anything to do with it? Just don't act dumb, John. I know you better than that. You and Elton own the building that houses the new store. And your names appear on all of the forms and documents required to open the business. Langford's friends had little trouble figuring this out. Philip Hughes is only a front, you are correct. Of course I could never fool you so. What are you planning to do, will you stop it? She asked. Hell no. Elton and I have put too much money in this to simply walk away. If you pay attention, I believe things will grow significantly worse over the following few days. What else are you planning to do? Can things get any worse than this, she questioned. I am not sure, in fact I might be mistaken. Forget what I've said, I replied, knowing that the seed had been laid and she couldn't forget about it now. The way you treated Brian and Baxter following their arrest was appalling. You reared those guys and should have shown them far more compassion than you did. I expected more of you, she scolded before leaving. I am just interested, Marcy. When did you inform the lads, I asked. But she didn't answer and slammed the door as she exited. I spent the following week with Jessica. She took as much time off from school as she could and showed me her favorite sites within a 100-mile radius. I was not shocked when she informed me she planned to stay in the area after graduation. I missed her but was glad she was doing well. When I arrived home I found a few surprises. Foster King was an extremely busy man. I had no idea why he was chained to that motorized cart or whether he actually required it. Apparently, his money and influence in the neighborhood were very important. Joyce King put together a fresh team of some of the most accomplished lawyers in the state. By the end of the week, she was back in her former residence, while Langford and Marcy were living out of suitcases in a motel. I didn't know where the lads were, but I knew they'd been booted out of school and were awaiting a trial or hearing. I wasn't too concerned about that. Joyce had moved all of Langford and Marcy's clothes and things to a storage container. My efforts to employ Philip Hughes to drive the King Carpet Company out of business came to an abrupt halt. It turned out that Langford had never owned the corporation. Foster had kept it in his own name and held control of the entire operation, even though he hadn't used it in years. Philip left multiple calls on my answering machine insisting that we talk. I had no idea that Philip Hughes and Joyce King were pals. I had no idea how good friends they were. But they were close enough to trust one another. Foster King sacked his son and obtained a court order to keep him out of the firm and everything linked with it, including the company car. He also appointed Joyce as the new manager. She had no business expertise, so her only option was to ask Philip for aid. Philip was divided between his commitment to Elton and me and his desire to assist Joyce. He really wanted to please everyone and sought my guidance. Elton was 3,000 miles away, and my agent had 2 offers on the house for me to evaluate. One of them required owning the house for 30 days, which I accepted. Jessica was gone. Elton and Beth were gone, and I had no reason to remain in the area. Marcy pulled up just as the realtor was hanging the sold sign on the house. She stood in the driveway staring at the word sold for a long time, then walked up to the home. Is this a done deal? Or will they need to obtain finance or loan approval? She asked. It is a done deal, I replied. They had the money and they wanted it quickly. I will be out of here before the end of the week. Why do you care? She questioned. Joyce King hired a costly lawyer and was able to take the house away from Langford. We were seeking for a place to stay until we found a new home. Marcy explained. Home? I just thought you might like to rent this one, I suggested with a smile, knowing full well their financial issues. I'm sure that with Langford's money, you should have no trouble finding a place to reside. Marcy had no idea I was well aware of their financial troubles. I watched as she left, and I was certain that her and Langford's situation was about to get worse. Philip informed Foster about the way Langford conducted business and treated his wife. Papa wasn't happy, and Marcy did not pursue the matter further as she left. I observed an Alamo vehicle rental sticker on the car's back bumper. In the evening, Philip Hughes and Joyce King came to see me. I was amazed at how nicely they got along with one another. It did not take us long to reach an agreement. Empire Carpets would rebrand as Empire Floors, selling exclusively tile and wood flooring. while King Carpets would solely sell carpets. Philip had no difficulty with running both enterprises but would only do so if Elton and I agreed, as he believed the two enterprises would complement each other. He also stated that King Carpets may be interested in purchasing Empire in a few years. I felt it was extremely clever of him. And Joyce smiled embarrassingly as he mentioned that they appeared to be closer than I expected. I donated all of the furniture and items in the house to the Salvation Army. And in addition, I donated the majority of my clothing. It was time for me to acquire a new closet. And now was the best time. By the time I finished deciding everything I wanted or required, it all fit in my car. I spent the entire day paying off invoices and ensuring I had no outstanding debts. Foster King managed to get my mobile phone number and forced me to join him for supper that night. Today was my last day in the city, and I was certain that everything would go smoothly and looked forward to seeing Maya again. Foster King was a proud man who liked to brag a little. He briefed me on his encounters with Hughes and Joyce. He had no doubt that the action taken against his son was justified. And he thanked me for letting Hughes and Joyce in on our business. I attempted to listen to everything he said, partly out of politeness. But my attention kept drifting to Maya. She was wearing a grey-green evening gown that made her eyes glitter, and her hair and makeup looked immaculate. Foster realized I was distracted and interrupted me mid-sentence, making me uncomfortable. His laughing revealed his intense awareness. Maya did not participate in the conversation, instead stopping Foster from reordering beverages and allowing him to order dessert. He pretended to sulk and made a half-hearted remark beneath his breath. Maya excused herself to the ladies' room, which allowed Foster an opportunity to quarrel with me. "What are your plans once the house is sold?" he asked. "The house is sold and tomorrow morning I'll leave for San Francisco to see my friends Elton and Beth. They had a baby which they named after me. They called their baby girl John, so Johnny." "How could I say no?" I replied. "Where will you go when you come back?" he inquired. "I have no idea. I'll leave my automobile at the airport with everything I own packed inside. I believe I'll drive south until anything captures my attention," I said. Foster then proposed an unexpected idea. "I've got a better idea. Come live at my place. My house is too big for only me, and I hate seeing Maya alone all the time." I was taken aback by his suggestion. "Foster, what the hell are you talking about?" I asked. "Maya's husband perished in a car accident around 3 years ago. She has no friends in West Palm Beach and little chance to find the proper man. You're the only male she's expressed interest in over the last year. Has she mentioned anything to you?" "No. But I have noticed how she looks at you. And she's always intrigued when I mention you. I'll tell you this: come live with us for a month. If it doesn't work out, you can get in your car and start exploring again. You don't lose anything and I'll be quite happy," he finished. The conversation ended when Maya returned to the table. She smiled at both of us as if we had just done something wrong and enjoyed it. I was absolutely heading to West Palm Beach. My visit with Elton and Beth went well. The new proprietors were able to grow the business to 20 states and various international destinations in a few years. The stock options will most likely be worth far more than the money we were paid.